But anyway, my interest aside, I think there are lots of questions here. Back to Alan, and then even I think the ones of Betchay and of Mario have been answered. But if you don't mind, would you like to take the Q&A, Alisa, at this point? I think there are important questions here.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
So maybe, Alan, there's a question from, I see it from Dr. Cadiz. Is it difficult to look for fossils? How many paleontologists are doing work like you in the country? So maybe you can answer that.
Okay. As mentioned already by Dr. Alampay, fossils are not very rare in the Philippines, especially when you talk about marine fossils, which are actually very common considering that for a very long time, Philippines was underwater. So I think what's so rare or what's so special about the fossils is that not a lot of people actually study paleontology, and we're, I think, limited to reports, and no recent systematic studies have been done on fossils in the Philippines. So they appear rare, but in reality, they're actually not. Regarding how many paleontologists in the Philippines,
Yeah.
it depends on the specialization. So like, for example, for calcareous nanofossil, we have, of course, our laboratory. But we used to have colleagues from the Department of Energy and from the regional offices of the Mines and Geosciences Bureau were also doing nanofossil studies. But recently, there's a decline in the number of paleontologists working on that particular fossil group. So I must say probably less than 10 people working on calcareous nanofossils, and even less for the other fossil groups.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the vertebrates. There's not a lot of institutions working on vertebrate remains in the Philippines, except perhaps for the National Museum and the Archaeological Studies program in UP.
Yeah. So we're very thankful that the National Museum and ASP, there's been an influx of new or young blood, no? And so there's plus the National Museum has that really nice building, of course, and so that's really going to contribute to more studies being done. There used to be more. There used to be more of us paleontologists, but we're trying to keep people active by producing more and more masters and PhD students.
Yeah.
There's also a question from Adong. I might have missed it, Dr. Fernando, but could you explain how the cervid fossils ended up in a marine environment?
Actually, it's not just the cervid fossils, but all the vertebrate fossils were found within the channel deposits. So the assumption is they were all transported. So from terrestrial to the channel deposits, which we interpret to have formed in a transitional marine environment, very close to fluvial environment, because we have a lot of evidence, like, for example, the presence of Austria, the presence of this brackish water specimens or fossils. And then we also have a lot of wood fragments combined with marine organisms like the benthic foraminifera. So we're looking at an environment that's not totally marine, but experiences or actually has some contribution coming from the land or from the terrestrial environment as well. In this case, fluvial environment. That's why I mentioned fluvio-deltaic depositional environment. So it's in a transitional marine setting.
Okay. And Jennifer De Leon Flores is asking whether you're coordinating with the DNR Biodiversity Management Division to be able to help in the protection of excavation sites and also possible support to other needs for the further research if
Okay.
needed.
Yeah, except for Palawan, which we are actually doing with the Palawan Council for Sustainable Development. So we all know that we are very strict in giving permits for research in the island. For the sites in Pangasinan and La Union, actually we don't have any established connection or probably MOU or MOA with BNB. but we are in close coordination with the LGUs and the companies where the fossil localities are situated. So like for example, for the site, we got assurance from the company that the channel deposits will be preserved for us to be able to finish our study and be able to collect the fossils in the area. It's not, it's within the quarry area, but it's not the rock or it's not the type of rock they're actually quarrying. It just so happens that the channel was exposed because they have to, I think, remove some parts or some rocks in the area to expose the rocks that they are actually quarrying for, which are the limestones. So, yeah, so no coordination with the DNR, but we are in close coordination with companies and LGUs in the fossil localities.
Yeah. So maybe in the future when there are
Yeah,
other.
in the future, yeah, definitely. Especially when an area needs protection. Because when you actually report the occurrence of these vertebrate fossils or any kind of fossil for that matter in these areas, people will start to look for fossils and start collecting them without any proper documentation. So it's also a big problem for us because just like what I said, the scientific values of these fossils will be lost forever.
Toms is also asking Alan whether isolated reports of shark teeth and fish otoliths found in northern Luzon will be studied soon.
Okay, actually started along with some students doing the like an inventory of all the fossils, vertebrate fossils that have been reported in the Philippines the last few years. And this actually include unpublished and published reports, like for example, museum reports, or this place that we have in the museum, but I think it's too much. So I stopped the collation of all the data, but I think it's very important that we have that data so that we know where we at right now, what still needs to be done, and how else we can improve paleontological studies of other fossil groups in the Philippines, just like what Doms mentioned. Otoliths, the fish otoliths are basically reported in archaeological investigations, but I'm not sure whether anyone is doing any detailed study on fish otoliths. But for shark tooth or shark teeth, definitely a lot of reports have been made, but I haven't seen any published paper so far regarding shark tooth or shark teeth in the Philippines, except for that megalodon tooth that was discovered recently in Maribuhok. But I mean, even that megalodon tooth was collected by a local and was given to the National Museum. So I think no detailed study has been done yet on this fossil group, which I think we as paleontologists, we in the academy should do.
Yeah.
Because it's, again, a very good contribution to Philippine paleontology.
And we
So
hope
that's a lot of work.
more can join us because, it's just down to a few people now, and the ones who are slightly older than me are now also trying to retire, and so we're losing a lot of specialists. And paleontology it's hard work in the sense that you are the machine. So it's not as if we have an analyzing equipment ready. It's really the human person that becomes the machine that identifies and analyzes the specimen. So it takes quite some time. Dr. Riesa, Rene Riesa is asking whether there's a branch of paleontology that deals with past organisms or fossils in lacustrine environments, because lacustrine environments were thought of as the source rocks for petroleum deposits here. No? Yes, there is. Our problem is that you need a particular microfossil again, although you can use mollusks, no, Alan? I think you can use mollusks for lake deposits, but for microfossils, the reason we like to use microfossils is because you can get a lot of it from just a small amount of sediments, but you need to study diatoms, for example, and that's another organism. It's hard enough for us to cover coccolithophores and foraminifera. We dabble in diatoms once in a while, but we're really not specialists in it. We were hoping that some of our students would take it on, but wala pa. We haven't been successful in producing a diatom paleontologist yet. We've attempted a few times, but hindi po natuloy yun. Pero totoo, kailangan talagang there needs to be, one of us needs to be, or more of us need to be specializing in the freshwater or the lacustrine environment. No?
So I would like to mention also, there's Kevin Garas here. I see his name here. Yeah. So from the Mines and Geosciences Bureau was also doing research on coral fossils. This time it's on the paleoclimate reconstruction. So it's good that people are branching out to different fossil groups, which actually, again, we have a lot in the Philippines, except that no one is studying them. That's why if you're going to look at all the publications of all the recent fossil finds in the Philippines, you can see that most of them are actually from other countries.
Yeah.
So very few Filipinos actually are involved in this research. That's why even if it's not my specialization, we're all micropaleontologists. So I'm trying my best to be involved in this kinds of research to have Filipino representation in this very important research.
Alan, Maddie is asking whether the cold seep molluscan assemblages you found indicate that there are organic rich horizons underneath, which may be source rocks for hydrocarbons. What are the implications in finding cold seep assemblages?
Okay, for I think Leyte, the age of the chemosynthetic mollusk in Leyte is early or applies into Pleistocene. And interestingly, Leyte, or that part of Leyte, is actually one of the areas that is being explored for hydrocarbons, if I'm not mistaken. And the hydrocarbons are actually hosted in rocks that are almost of the same age as the chemosynthetic mollusk. So I think we can see some connection. Where we have this chemosynthetic mollusk, there's always a possibility of having this hydrocarbon deposits, which could have fed or which could have resulted to the proliferation of these chemosynthetic bivalves in a particular locality. And like, for example, in one of the field works we conducted in Leyte, we observed that some of the chemosynthetic mollusks are actually, what do you call this, concentrated in a structure that was identified to be a chimney, which again is a concrete evidence that in those areas before, when those chemosynthetic bivalves are still existing, there could be like this some sources, hydrocarbon, whether it's methane or something else, organic matter, that's actually feeding the system.
Nina Cadiz from Biology, IBS in UP Los Baños is asking Dr. Nina Cadiz if it's difficult to be a nanopaleontologist. I wonder how much research funds are given to these noble and significant research works. Actually, we're just faculty members just like you. Dr. Cadiz studies plants. She's a botanist. So we study these fossils that are found in rocks. But it keeps on extending. So you study one and then it's something else. So you need core sediments really to be able to get really nice, diverse coccolithophores. And as I've told you, we've just been opportunists, I guess. There were some cruises or expeditions that went from other countries and universities from other countries that went into Philippine waters, and usually they would need a paleontologist or a nanofossil expert in particular to be on board because they need the ages right away. So that's what I was telling you guys earlier, that in 15 minutes, if you're looking at deep sea sediments, actually you can give the age of the sediments if you're lucky, no? But it's tiyaga. It's a lot of it's passion that moves us. It's passion that moves us. At the start, we barely could publish any ISI journals because in ISI journals because we really did not have enough analysis that from equipment that we did not have, and so we had to start partnering with colleagues, asking favors. So that we can actually, collaborate and be able to fund it. So now we're in a better place. We have an SEM. We have Thank you to the Cooperate program. Some of the students have been able to go out in other labs and do the analysis there to complement the paleontological analysis that's being done. Because now more than ever, and even actually even decades before, it has to be, any result has to be ano to, multidisciplinary in a way for it to be published. Kevin is asking that aside from oceanographic factors, the subtle variability in coccolithophore assemblage in El Nino and El Nino years could be attributed to the masking of contributing effects of other interannual and seasonal climate modes like the monsoon or the ITCZ. That's correct. Do we have other coccolith studies in the southern Philippines near the West Pacific warm pool that can probably explain the ENSO phenomenon? We have one student, although we're not too sure, George Padre, who's going to study the Davao core, and then one offshore offshore Luzon ba? Alan yun? Or offshore Mindanao.
Offshore Mindanao. Yeah.
Mindanao pa, that's facing the Pacific. He might be able to see something using alkenones, but it's going to be very rough in terms of, you know, very specifically saying whether it's an ENSO, there would be an ENSO signal or not. The focus is in looking at the Indonesian through flow and partly also that entire system, but his samples are actually not exactly in the warm pool. We just wanted for him to be able to do a comparison between the ocean, the one that's facing the ocean and the one that's going inside Davao Gulf. And we're happy to have these scores care of cruise that Alan went on, no? A few years back. Okay, so
By the way, ma'am, siguro news, while you were doing your talk, I just received an email from a journal. So my paper on the new fossil of calcareous fossil was already accepted. It's named after you. So it's final. It's final already. So this.
fan dito. Nakakaya. Oh.
I-announce ko na. It's official.
Parang si Ma'am Giselle, ina-announce ko na rin, Professor Emeritus siya.
Wow!
Ito lang, i-decide ng BOR. So, ikinakalat ko na sa buong mundo.
Congratulations, Ma'am Giselle.
Oo. Yung tinatanong Luis Masigla earlier, is the Philippines less of a paradise for paleontologists like you given its volcano-tectonic setting? If you remember, even though we're an island arc, it's a complex and mature island arc already. So we have a lot of sedimentary rocks covering all of the island arc material. No? So maski na very active ang ating terrain, ang dami nating sedimentary rocks, ang daming basins na napuno. So kaya nga, that's why the Geology of the Philippines is actually organized, that book by Mario and Rolly, is actually organized by basins, is because, you know, we really have a lot of these places where sedimentary material is collected. Okay, so Jaan is giving us information about RA 11333. Okay, and I think Svetlana, I don't know if you're still there, and were you you were raising your hand earlier. I'm not too sure if you still want to ask a question. In the meantime, I would like to thank, there are people on YouTube, geologists on YouTube, Dr. Roger Laraya, Sylvia Ramos, and Ma'am Demta Baluda, who are listening in on us. And Betch, actually, Ma'am Sylvia is asking for copies of your paper. She's interested in your Sinulith papers. If you can send it to her now. We also have Angie Revilla from DOE. And of course, I'm also happy to see Dr. Makandog, I believe from UPLB, also listening in on the talks. I think that's it. Ma'am Giselle, Richmond, would you like to give the ending speech?
Lisa, it's amazing. Thanks for getting this community of scholars and practitioners together. It's a very rich field. It's just showing us that there's just so much more that we need to focus on, invest in. I wanted to tell everyone that PAASE is committed to supporting Philippine science and technology. And on August 10 and 11, we have group discussions led by some of our famous eminent scientists, some based abroad, but some of them are also none other than our national scientist, Luli Cruz, and President of the NAS, Rodora Sanza, from the Marine Science Institute. They're supposed to lead the discussion on research proposals, but there's another group discussion on STEM education and R&D training led by this evolutionary biologist, former dean of New York University. His name is Michael Purganan, and chemist who's into polymers and nanotechnology and additive manufacturing. His name is Gobet Advincula. And I just think that there's a need to incorporate uh, a statement, major statements on uh, basic research, a research that covers what you are doing. You might say it's basic research, but then, of course, it has applications. The sad thing is, you have to think of how to get a grant if uh, they will only fund the applied research. And so you'll have to put it under a petroleum discovery uh, grant, right? To be able to study this. So why does it have to be that way when we know very well that this kind of research is essential to our uh, growth as a nation and as an identity as a people and as a, as a Philippine Islands, uh, important in biogeography and evolutionary biology. So I'd like to end there and say thank you very much. This is the session where after 4.5 hours, there's still over 100 participants. So yesterday, the marine session dwindled to about 90 participants by 12 noon. No? And well, there were supposed to be 15-minute talks by the other speakers, but everyone spoke for 30 minutes. It's just telling you there's just so much to share that's interesting to the audience. So this is really a memorable session for me. And I just think that under PAASE or even outside PAASE, you can keep this group together and have meetings like this regularly because it's so informative, so educational, and scientifically, intellectually stimulating for all of us. So thank you very much to my co-host Alisa, to our distinguished speakers, Dr. Solidum, Dean Mario, then Dr. Alan, Dr. Betchay, and Dr. Alisa. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. I'd like to have a chance to plug PAASE at the proper time. Many of you would like to become members of PAASE. It's a very dynamic, interactive group, and we're now dividing it into research clusters, and this would be one of the research clusters, definitely geological and physical sciences. We have over 380 members, and we're on this Fresh Start campaign for us to pay our lifetime membership dues for those members who are in the audience. And we're saying, hey, this year we didn't have a registration for fee to attend over 200 presentations, oral presentations, 45 posters, and 8 group discussions. So how about just investing the money for the registration fee into the lifetime membership fee? Then let's move to the other poster. Uh, Mon, could you post this one? So PAASE welcomes donations. It's a nonprofit volunteer group. We do not receive funding, major funding from the government or from the private sector. And so we're just trying to raise funds for our membership fees and the generous donations of people who are interested in our science advocacies. And if you click the projects link there, this is in our website, you'll see the kinds of projects that we want to support, okay, including helping our graduate students pursue their graduate studies abroad, like Alisa and Rene did, and Alan and Betchay did. And all of us are back here, and we're trying to contribute to science progress in our country. So I'd like to end there. Finally, perhaps to let you know that 40th APAMS, this is our anniversary. We have week 3 next week, so many parallel sessions on different science and engineering themes, 3 a day, And then we also have the plenary sessions, and they're free. You're all welcome to attend. You just have to register. Let me just tell you who is our co-awardee in science this year. He's a guy at the U.S. National Institute of Health. You know what he's going to talk about? He's going to talk about stem cell organs on a chip. Okay, so on a chip, a semiconductor chip, and you are able to grow, say, stem cell liver cells, not just one type of cell, or kidney cells, not just one type of cell, almost like an organ. And this is going to like shortcut drug discovery development by reducing maybe the expense and the um, and the time for clinical trials. So just to show you, these are some of the exciting things that some of our PASA members are doing. So with that, I'd like to close this session. Thank you very much for staying till 12:30 noon. Many are hungry, but to me, food for the mind is just as important or even more important than food for the stomach. So thank you very much, everyone. And at this point,
Do
I'd
we
like
take
to
a
close
picture?
this session.
Do we take a picture that
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
a
the
picture? Yeah.
screenshot, yeah. The group screenshot 101. Nina, thank you for staying with us. Yes. And
Maraming salamat.
Demi, if Demi's around, that would be great.